Hello, greetings to you all. It's my delight to welcome you to the class for today. As you can see, we'll be talking about the lecture teaching method. What do we have to consider in today's class? Let's take a look at the objectives for the class for today. By the end of this lesson, each of you should be able to describe what the lecture method is. You should be able to outline the characteristics of the lecture method. You should be able to discuss the relative strengths and weaknesses of the lecture method. You should be able to outline how the lecture method can be applied in practice, which invariably means we have this to cover: the definition or description of the lecture method, the characteristics of the lecture method, the strengths and weaknesses of the lecture method, application in practice, as well as the tips and strategies for improvement. Let's dive in straight. The lecture method, how can you describe it? Take a look at this. When you look at the image, what can you see? Obviously, the image is helping you to appreciate one important thing: a teacher in front of a large class doing all the talking. And this essentially is what the lecture method is all about. It's a method, it's an approach to teaching where the teacher does most, if not all, of the talking. The role of the student is just that of passive listeners, listening quietly most of the time. This is what a typical lecture method is. Sometimes, perhaps, the teacher may make use of visual aids so that he can convey the information better. But basically, the teacher does all the talking, writes on the board, dictates notes. This is what the lecture method is all about. And from this, we can start guessing what the characteristics of the lecture method is. So take a look at the picture. The teacher with his notes, head full of knowledge, board full of information, passing it on to the learners. This can be what the lecture method is, but that is some basic characteristics. Let's take a look at them one after the other. First, structured presentation. Yes, one good basic characteristic of the lecture method is that the information is organized with clear introduction, main points, and conclusion. Just verbal discussion anyway. And that leads to what the second characteristic is all about: verbal communication. Most of the time, the information is conveyed through spoken words. Sometimes the teacher uses visual aids, slides, diagram, charts, models, but basically most of the time drawn on the board. And one other basic characteristic is that it is teacher-centered with limited student interaction. What this means is that the interaction between the learners, the student, and the teacher is very limited. Even among the learners, such interactions are very, very limited. I want taking a look at this. Look at the back diagram now. You see, the teacher does all the talking. Little interaction with the learners, little interactions among the learners. Let's now look at examples of the lecture methods, or lecture method rather, with respect to chemistry teaching. Lecture method can be used to present chemistry concept, basically all chemistry concept. It can be used to discuss historical events with respect to some chemistry concept. And of course, when you have mathematical formulae, when you have mathematical concept, you can just basically use the lecture method. Now to the strength of the lecture method. One interesting thing is that the lecture method allows the teacher to cover a lot of content in a short time. The lecture method saves time and money on teaching aids, just like what you see here. Apart from the chalkboard, the teacher doesn't need any aid. So it saves times on materials. And one other good advantage of the strength is that it helps the students to develop note-taking skills, and it fosters independent learning. You're on your own. You learn on your own. You're not interacting with anybody. And it provides the teacher with control over the flow and structure of the information. Nobody disturbs the teacher. He has full control over what he presents. And lecture method ensures consistent delivery of information to the entire class. Not that this one particular set of students gains better. No. Now about the weaknesses. Well, before that, still look at this diagram. You can see easily it depicts the strength. See the board, so much information within a short period of time. The information is there consistently passed on to everybody. You assimilate it the way you think is your best, is best for you, and the student there will be developing that note-taking skill. Let's look at the weaknesses of the lecture method. Just as it has its own strength, from that it has quite a number of weaknesses. One, it is teacher-centered. The approach focuses on what the teacher can do, not on the student. Two, it does not promote the development of practical skills and creativity. Just take it as the lecturer says it. Three, it makes the student to become passive learners. It reduces the roles of the student to that of memorization of fact without necessarily having to understand them. Was the teacher right? The student takes it down. When the teacher talks, the student writes down and take it the way it is being said. They don't need to understand it. They just have to memorize it. That is one major strength, weakness of the lecture method. And of course, it creates limited opportunity for students to ask questions or engage in discussions because the teacher wants to cover much within a short period of time. So that interaction with the students or among the learners is not created. So limited opportunity is there and does not cater for students of varying learning styles. True, we have students with different learning styles. Some are visual, some are auditory, so the lecture method will not create that avenue for students that may not benefit from the verbal delivery of instruction. Now, how is it applied in practice? Let's just take one example. Maybe the teacher is teaching the scientific method in SS1 chemistry. The objective is to introduce students to the scientific method and its steps. How will the teacher use this in practice? The teacher may give a structured lecture on the scientific method. Of course, he has got his method. He outlines the method. He outlines the scientific method. He then provides examples. He may use visual aid if he decides to. And sometimes he may now just engage the students rather in a class discussion. Now let's take a look at tips and strategies for improvement. Knowing fully well that the lecture method has its own inherent strengths and weaknesses, how can we improve on the weaknesses? Know again that the weaknesses include not catering for students of varied learning styles, teacher-centered, not allowing interactions among the learners. So what can we do? Take a look at the image. You can see here now, teacher seems happier. The class seems more engaging, which means class participation. So what are those things the teacher can do to improve the lecture method of teaching? Engagement techniques, very critical, very important. The teacher may periodically incorporate questions, polls, opinion, so that it can encourage students to participate. You can see in that image that are anxious participants in the class, unlike previously where the students just sat down listening. The teacher can engage visual aids, a lot of them, to complement his verbal explanation, thereby taking care of visual learners. The teacher can make use of real-world examples so that what they are learning can be adequately made relevant to what they see in real world. The interactive element, yes, aside from the engagement techniques, the teacher can get the students involved in short activities, break up sections into discussion group so that the student can be active participant. And of course, feedback can encourage the student to provide feedback on the lecture method. The lecturer or the teacher who uses this method can improve the lecture method. By this, we hope you have really learned from today's class, focusing on the lecture method. By next class, we should be taking a look at another method of teaching. Bye for now.